The lobby smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and expensive perfume. It was just after 8 a.m., and the tech conference was already buzzing. Attendees streamed in through the revolving glass doors, suits, name badges, lanyards, laughter bouncing off the marble floor. Marcus stepped inside without much notice. No badge, no blazer, just a dark blue polo shirt, plain black slacks, and a ring of keys hooked to his belt loop. In one hand, he held a paper coffee cup. In the other, a small leather-bound notebook, worn at the edges. The security guard near the elevators barely glanced at him. Just another maintenance guy arriving early to check the rooms. He nodded at Marcus like they shared a secret. Invisible labor. Marcus nodded back. He moved with quiet confidence, pausing near a signage board that listed the day's schedule. Panel on AI ethics at 10 o'clock. Cybersecurity keynote at noon. A closed-door VC pitch session upstairs at 2 o'clock. He checked his watch. Still plenty of time. Upstairs, the conference staff bustled around, prepping nameplates and water bottles. A young woman in a black conference polo spotted Marcus stepping out of the elevator. Sir?" she called, catching up to him quickly. "This area's reserved for speakers and senior staff." "I know," Marcus replied. Calm. Neutral. She eyed his keys. "If you need access to clean, that's coordinated through facilities. I can call." "No need," Marcus said. "I'm expected." She blinked, thrown by the certainty in his tone, then smiled in that tight way people do when they're unsure but don't want to be rude. "Okay, well, make sure you check in at the admin desk next time." Marcus gave a slight nod. "Sure." He kept walking. Behind him, she lingered a moment longer before turning back to her clipboard. He hadn't lied. He was expected. They just didn't expect him. The conference room was polished to a high shine. Rows of sleek chairs faced a raised stage with twin screens glowing faint blue. A long table off to the side bore croissants, bottled water, and glossy brochures bearing the event's logo. Tomorrow's tech, today. Marcus stepped inside. Immediately, a man in a tight gray blazer spotted him. Early 40s, Bluetooth earpiece, the kind of guy who used words like synergy unironically. "Hey," the man said, stepping in front of Marcus. "We're not quite ready yet. Vendor setup is down the hall, opposite the catering entrance." "I'm not with catering," Marcus said. The man frowned. "Maintenance, then?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "No. Well, this area's limited access. We've got VIPs showing up soon. I'm going to need you to." A woman at the front of the room glanced over. Blazer, clipboard, conference badge that said lead coordinator. "Is there a problem?" she asked, walking over. "He says he's not maintenance or catering," Bluetooth guy explained, not looking at Marcus anymore. "But he's clearly not with the speakers either." "Sir," the coordinator said, a little more carefully now, "can I ask what your role is?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked past her, to the digital screen now cycling through the keynote schedule. His name would flash there soon enough. He gave a small smile. "You'll know soon." That answer didn't go over well. The coordinator's brows drew together. "Look," she said, "we've got a lot of sensitive materials in here. I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside until we verify your—" "Excuse me." A voice cut in from the doorway. Everyone turned. A younger man in a navy suit, phone in hand, strode in quickly. His eyes landed on Marcus. "There you are," he said, clearly relieved. "Sorry I wasn't down to greet you. Traffic was a mess." He turned to the others, suddenly aware of the tension. "Everything okay?" Bluetooth guy was the first to respond, his tone shifting. "We just weren't sure who he was." The man in the suit frowned. "That's Marcus Dean. He's our keynote speaker. Cybersecurity expert. Founder of Sentinel Works. I sent his photo out with the security memo last week." Silence. The coordinator's face went pale. Marcus nodded slightly. No smugness. No gloating. Just quiet confirmation. He stepped further into the room, past the folding arms, the stunned faces, the unspoken apologies. No one stopped him this time. The room felt different now. Not because Marcus had changed, he hadn't, but because everyone else had. The clipboard coordinator stepped aside quickly, mumbling something about securing the notes from IT. Bluetooth guy disappeared toward the refreshment table, suddenly very interested in bottled water. Conversations picked back up in pockets, but the tone had shifted. Not louder, just more cautious. Marcus walked slowly toward the stage, still holding his notebook. He didn't look at anyone directly, but he felt their eyes. Noticing the creases in his polo shirt, the plainness of his shoes, the age of the notebook in his hand. Trying to make it all make sense. The young man in the navy suit stayed beside him, gesturing toward the tech staff to mic him up. "They'll get you wired in just a second," he said. "Do you want to run through the slides?" "No need," Marcus replied. "I don't use them." The man hesitated. "Right, of course. Your team mentioned that. You prefer off the cuff." "Not off the cuff," Marcus said. "I just prefer people look at me, not screens." The tech staff clipped a small microphone to his collar. No fanfare. No music. Just the low murmur of 100 quiet recalibrations in the room behind him. Bluetooth guy returned to his seat near the front row. He didn't say anything as Marcus passed him. Just gave a stiff nod and looked away. It wasn't fear. Not quite. It was something closer to discomfort. The kind that comes when someone realizes they were watching the wrong details and missed the most important ones. Up on stage, Marcus adjusted the mic and took a slow breath. He didn't glance at the screens. Didn't shuffle papers. He looked directly at the audience. "Let's talk about trust," he said. His voice calm, steady. The room went still. Nobody moved. Phones, once casually flicked through, stayed face down. Laptops, mid-type, paused. Even the conference photographer, crouched near the side of the stage, slowly lowered his camera. Marcus let the silence stretch a few more seconds. Long enough to feel it. Not awkward, just intentional. "You came here to learn about cybersecurity," he said. "You'll get that. But let me start with something simpler." He held up his notebook, the worn leather cover catching the light. "This," he said, "holds more insight than any keynote slide deck you'll see today." Someone in the back shifted in their chair. "I've spent 20 years studying breach points," Marcus continued. "Weak passwords. Open ports. Unpatched systems. But the biggest vulnerability I see?" He looked directly at Bluetooth guy, then let his gaze sweep across the audience. "Assumptions." A woman in the second row uncrossed her arms. A man scribbled something in a notepad, not because he had to, but because he wanted to remember it. "When I walked in this morning," Marcus said, "a few of you looked at what I was wearing, at the badge I didn't have, and decided who I was." He wasn't angry. There was no heat in his voice. Just clarity. "And here's the problem with that," he added, closing the notebook softly. "Insecurity isn't just in systems. It's in people. In the choices we make when we're not paying attention to what actually matters." He paused. No one was checking their watch now. Trust isn't built with credentials. It's built with consistency. With presence. With truth. A few heads nodded. Marcus gave a slight smile. "We'll get to the technical stuff. But first, I need you to understand the human part." Then he said nothing more. Just stood there a moment, watching the crowd absorb it. He didn't need to say he belonged. He'd already proven it. In the row behind the sponsors' seats, two men leaned toward each other. "Who is this guy again?" One whispered, half covering his mouth. "Marcus Dean, founder of Sentinel Works," the other replied, eyes still locked on the stage. "They say he flagged that federal breach last year before anyone else." The first man raised his eyebrows, sat back slowly. The conversation was happening in hushed tones all across the room. Low murmurs, quiet recalibrations. Even those who'd barely glanced up during previous sessions were now fully tuned in. At the side of the room, the clipboard coordinator stood near the wall, arms folded. She wasn't scanning the schedule anymore. She was watching Marcus. Closely. She didn't speak, but her thoughts were all over her face. Regret. Confusion. A slow, dawning realization that the interaction from earlier wasn't going to fade quietly into the background. And Bluetooth guy? Still in the front row, but he sat differently now. Leaned forward. Chin in hand. That practiced confidence, the kind that comes from years of being listened to, was nowhere to be found. On stage, Marcus moved without pacing. No drama. Just presence. "I'm not interested in being inspirational," he said. "I'm interested in being useful." He flipped open the notebook. "Let's talk about real exposure. Not the kind in your firewalls. The kind in your teams." The room leaned in. Even those who hadn't wanted to. Because now they weren't just listening to a speaker. They were listening to the man they almost sent out the door. Marcus scanned the crowd, then set the notebook down on the podium. "When people hear breach, they think passwords, firewalls, code," he said. "But those aren't the first cracks. The first breach always happens here." He tapped two fingers against his temple. "In how we see people." There were no slides behind him. Just a blank blue screen. It made the room feel smaller. More focused. "A few hours ago," he said, "someone stopped me from entering this room. Thought I was with janitorial or food service. I wasn't insulted. I've done both of those jobs." He said it plainly. No bitterness. "But it reminded me why I'm here." He let that settle. In cybersecurity, we talk about zero trust architecture, the idea that you verify everything, assume nothing. That's good policy. But we've applied it to people too. A woman near the back nodded slowly. The man beside her looked down, uneasy. "We walk into a room and we decide who belongs. Who doesn't? Who's important. Who's not? He paused. And the irony is, most data breaches happen because someone trusted the wrong thing and ignored the right one. Another silence. I wasn't stopped this morning because I posed a threat. I was stopped because I didn't look like what someone expected a keynote speaker to look like. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight was in the stillness. But the truth is, that moment, that assumption, is the very flaw your companies pay millions trying to prevent. He leaned on the podium. You want to secure your systems? Start by securing your culture. A few people shifted in their chairs, uncomfortable now, not because he was wrong, but because he wasn't. And that was the point. At the back of the room, a young woman in a red blazer lowered her phone, stopping her quiet attempt to capture a photo. She wasn't trying to post it anymore. She just wanted to listen. Marcus continued, his tone measured, almost conversational. Bias isn't loud, he said. It doesn't always come with slurs or shouts. Sometimes it sounds like, are you sure you're in the right room? He glanced briefly at the clipboard coordinator. She looked down. Said nothing. In tech, we pretend we're data-driven. But we're often driven by habit. By comfort. By who we're used to seeing in charge. No one interrupted him. No coughs. No side talk. Just the quiet tick of realization spreading across rows. Marcus looked around. I'm not asking anyone here to feel bad. I'm asking you to feel aware. A man in his 50s, conference badge that read advisory board, nodded slowly. His arms unfolded. Because the same instincts that make someone question a man in a polo shirt? Marcus said. Those are the instincts that overlook talent. That miss red flags. That assume the wrong people are safe and the right ones are threats. He stepped away from the podium. Now he was just standing there. No stage act. No distance. I'm not here because I dress like you. Or sound like you. Or move the way you think a founder should. He looked across the crowd. I'm here because I earned it. And whether or not that fits what you pictured, it doesn't change the truth. A quiet voice near the front said, almost involuntarily, damn. Marcus didn't react. He just kept going. And the same goes for everyone you've ever dismissed before you had the full story. There it was. Not a lesson about code. A lesson about perception. Delivered calmly. Unshakably. And finally unmistakably heard. As Marcus stepped back toward the podium, a slow shift rolled through the room. It wasn't dramatic. Just posture changes. Loosened jaws. People realizing they had been holding their breath. He glanced down at his notebook, then closed it and set it aside. He didn't need it now. I'm going to give you something practical, he said. Because that's what people expect from a keynote. Tools. Tips. Frameworks. He paused. But first, let's be honest about what actually happens in your organizations. A few heads lifted. You hire who feels familiar. You promote who makes you comfortable. And you listen hardest to whoever sounds most like you. Silence. And if someone walks in the door who doesn't match that picture, a woman, a black man, someone older, someone quiet, you start them 3 steps behind. He wasn't angry. He was clear. And when that person succeeds anyway, you call them impressive. But what you really mean is, I didn't expect that. The clipboard coordinator swallowed hard. She wasn't writing anymore. Neither was Bluetooth guy. He'd set his pen down and hadn't picked it back up. Marcus folded his arms, relaxed. You don't fix a system by adding more rules, he said. You fix it by changing what you value. He let that hang. Do you value presence? Or performance? Conformity? Or capacity? He looked out across the room again. Because the breach you're afraid of isn't just in your software. He pointed to his chest. It's in here. And if you don't patch that, nothing else matters. No applause. Not yet. Just quiet reckoning. The kind that settles into people slowly. And stays. Marcus stepped down from the stage. Not dramatically, just enough to stand on the same level as the front row. I'm not here to entertain you, he said. I'm not a surprise guest speaker brought in to shake things up. He looked at Bluetooth guy, not with malice, just clarity. I'm the reason half your companies didn't get breached last year. And I was invisible to you the moment I walked in. Someone toward the middle let out a breath like they'd been holding it since part 1. Marcus walked slowly between the aisles now, just speaking. No mic. No spotlight. You checked my shoes before you checked my record. My shirt before you considered my work. And you weren't alone. He turned, caught the eye of the woman in red who had tried to take his photo earlier. She held his gaze. Didn't look away. I don't need you to remember my name after this, Marcus said. But you do need to remember what you almost missed. He returned to the front of the room, picked up his notebook again. This isn't about me, he said. It's about the next person who doesn't fit your mold. The one you're tempted to redirect. Or ignore. Or test just to see if they're legit. He paused. Let me save you some time. He held up the notebook. They're already legit. You're just late seeing it. A woman in the back quietly clapped once, caught herself, then let her hands rest in her lap. But the message had landed. Not just on the staff. On the room. And on every person now replaying their own past assumptions and rethinking the stories they'd been telling themselves. Marcus set the notebook back down, this time with finality. I'm going to open the floor, he said. Not because I need your questions. but because some of you need to ask them. There was hesitation. Then a hand. Tentative. From a man in his late 30s wearing a Navy badge lanyard and the kind of stiff blazer you only wear when you want to be taken seriously. Marcus nodded toward him. I think I owe you an apology, the man said, voice low but steady. I was one of the ones who didn't think you were the speaker. Marcus just looked at him. Not forgiving. Not punishing. Just waiting. The man cleared his throat. So I guess my question is, how do we fix it? That instinct. That bias. The room waited. Marcus spoke simply. You don't fix it by feeling bad. You fix it by noticing it every time it happens. Then interrupting it. He stepped forward. You see someone in a hoodie and assume they're staff? Pause. Ask yourself why. You hear someone with an accent and assume they're junior? Pause again. More nods now. People weren't just hearing him, they were seeing themselves. It's not about guilt, he continued. It's about pattern recognition. You do it in tech. Start doing it in life. Another hand went up. A woman near the aisle. Do you ever get tired of having to prove yourself? Marcus didn't answer right away. Every day, he said finally. But I don't prove myself for them. He glanced around the room. I do it for the ones watching quietly. The ones who haven't been seen yet. And just like that, the air changed again. Because now it wasn't just a keynote. It was something else. Something they'd carry home. Toward the back, unnoticed until now, sat a young man no one had spoken to all day. Early 20s. Thin, nervous posture. No company badge. No suit. Just a volunteer pass clipped to his shirt and a laptop resting on his knees. He raised his hand. Marcus saw it instantly. Go ahead. The room turned, subtly curious, not out of rudeness, but reflex. I'm not supposed to ask questions, the young man said quickly. I'm just shadowing AV. But, he paused unsure. Marcus waited. How do you stay calm when people treat you like you don't belong? It wasn't a rhetorical question. It was personal. Everyone knew it. Marcus walked slowly toward him. Not towering. Just present. I remind myself, he said, that their view of me doesn't change the truth about me. The young man nodded, but Marcus wasn't finished. And I remind myself, he added, voice low, that one day they might need what only I can offer. The words landed quietly. The AV volunteer gave a small, almost imperceptible smile, the kind that means, I needed that. Marcus turned back to the room. That's why I don't get loud. Why I don't argue at the door. Because I know what I'm carrying. And they don't. He paused. But by the end, they will. No one clapped. Not yet. But for the first time all morning, the applause didn't feel like something waiting to happen. It felt earned. And inevitable. After Marcus answered the AV volunteer's question, the room sat with a kind of quiet tension, not the kind that demanded release, but the kind that begged reflection. Several people looked like they wanted to speak but didn't. In the second row, the clipboard coordinator shifted in her seat. Her fingers tugged at the corner of her badge. She stood slowly. She started, then paused. I was the one who stopped you. At the door. A murmur passed through the room. Marcus nodded. I know. Her voice was steadier now. I didn't ask your name. I just looked at your keys, your clothes, and assumed. There was a tremor in her tone, but no self-pity. I'm sorry. Marcus didn't rush his response. I appreciate that, he said. But I don't need an apology. She blinked, confused. He continued. What I need is for you to change how you see the next person. That's what matters. She nodded, sat back down. Quietly. Behind her, Bluetooth guy was still silent. Elbows on knees, hands clasped. His face unreadable. But different. He didn't speak. Not yet. Maybe he wouldn't. But he stayed still and he stayed present, which, for someone like him, was its own kind of admission. Marcus walked back toward the center of the room, slow and sure. He didn't comment on the apologies. Didn't dramatize them. He just let them exist, bare and honest. And that was more than enough. There was no official end yet. But the tone in the room had shifted so completely that no one looked at the clock. Even the staff near the exits, the ones trained to keep schedules tight, stayed frozen. Marcus stood still at the front again. He didn't rush to fill the silence. You all came here today expecting strategy, he said. Code, defense models, breach analytics. He let that sink in. I could give you all of that. I've built the systems your companies now rely on. I've trained teams that protect data for millions. He looked around slowly. But none of that matters if the people behind those systems are still making decisions based on what someone looks like when they walk into the room. A man in a corner seat quietly lowered his eyes. He hadn't said a word all morning. This isn't just a talk, Marcus said. It's a checkpoint. Another pause. Check how you see people. Check who you tune out. Check who you assume needs to prove themselves. A few pens scribbled notes now, not because they were told to, but because they didn't want to forget. This room will forget my name eventually, Marcus added. But don't forget how this morning felt. He walked back toward the podium and placed a hand on it. That's the real lesson. Still no applause. No movement. Not because it wasn't deserved, but because the silence was saying more than anyone knew how to express. Marcus didn't wait for a standing ovation. He didn't need one. He thanked the audience with a small nod, stepped down from the front, and began walking toward the exit. No fanfare. Just calm, deliberate steps past rows of people who suddenly didn't know whether to meet his eyes or look away. Some did both. Bluetooth guy stood briefly, like he might say something, then sat back down, hands still clasped. He wasn't ready. The clipboard coordinator offered a faint smile as Marcus passed. It wasn't seeking forgiveness, just acknowledgement. Marcus returned it, a glance steady and neutral, then kept walking. In the back corner, the AV volunteer rose quickly from his seat and walked toward the side door, cutting through the edge of the crowd. He didn't call after Marcus, didn't try to interrupt. He just stood near the exit, eyes tracking him. Marcus nodded once as he passed. The kid smiled. That smile would last a while. Outside the room, the hallway was quiet. A few latecomers rushed by, glancing at their phones, unaware of what had just happened inside. The doors closed gently behind him. Inside, the audience remained seated. Some stared forward. Some stared at each other. No one quite ready to move, because the talk was over. But what it left behind wasn't. Later that day, the room reset. New chairs were arranged. A different speaker arrived. Someone polished the podium and reconnected the screens. But the shift, that subtle, uncomfortable, necessary shift, lingered. The clipboard coordinator didn't bark instructions as loudly. Bluetooth guy sat quieter in every session afterward. He didn't speak during panels, not because he was ashamed, but because he was finally listening. And the AV volunteer? He stayed until the end of the day. At one point, when no one was watching, he opened a blank document on his laptop and typed a single line. They looked right at him and still didn't see him. Then he closed it, didn't hit save, just needed to write it once. As people filtered out of the conference center that evening, blinking against the sun, checking rideshares, making dinner plans, only a few still talked about the technical panels. But every so often, someone said, "That guy this morning, Marcus something?" He was. They never finished the sentence. Didn't need to, because what he left behind wasn't just a message. It was a mirror, one they hadn't planned to stand in front of. But once they did, they couldn't unsee what it showed.